Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns, and in today's video I'm going to be turning my Idris capship into a more peaceful base of operations as the centre of a mining expedition. The issues with the new resource drive event's cargo elevators are well documented, so I'm not going to spend my time bemoaning them, but in order to avoid any such stress or frustration, I've decided to mine the required copper, corundum and tungsten. But to do that at scale, we're going to want to home away from home, letting us get off grid and stack up the jobs. So if this sounds good to you, then grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. The Idris is Star Citizen's current dominant combat ship, bringing a terrifying array of weaponry to the field. I've always been interested in the versatility and utility of capships in SC. And while the ship's hangar usually houses a wing of fighters in our usual combat-centric setups, I thought it would be fun to use it instead for a small fleet of MISC prospectors, allowing us to head out somewhere nice and remote, set down a forward operating base, and then set about mining the required mats for the event. One thing I would always say at the start of a video like this is not to get hung up on needing something like an Idris to have fun in SC. Eventually everything, including this capship, will be available to earn in-game. And in the meantime, an operation like this one is not a one-person job. So if you'd like to get involved with things like this, do swing by our Discord, the link's down in the video description. All you need to get going in-game is a starter pack. Just be sure to use the referral code when you create your account for a bit of extra startup capital. Mine's the one up on screen, but if you've got any mates who play already, just ask them for theirs. So with a little careful piloting, I found it helps to make sure you keep your landing gear up until you're safely inside. I managed to get 3 MISC prospectors loaded into the hangar. These solo miners have all been equipped with powerful Helix 1 lasers, and my favoured mods, the Focus 3 and Riga C3. If you want to learn all about mining, then I'll include a link to my full mining guide in the video description. It's a bit of a beast at just over an hour long, but it will go through everything in terms of loadouts, scanning and mining techniques. I also found that with a little careful parking, I could also squeeze in a MISC Hull A cargo hauler. This ship, like its big brother the Hull C, has the ability to expand to a decent 64 SEU cargo grid. But in its collapsed state it shrinks in size to the point that I could get it landed horizontally at the rear of the ship. As we'll see when we put some of this to the test, it didn't quite work out. But my idea here is that the 3 prospectors can go out and mine, come back and switch bags, and then the Hull A could be used to ferry full bags 8 at a time to a refinery to set up work orders. Speaking of bags, I needed quite a few of them to make this a worthwhile endeavour. I took my C2 up to the nearby Bajini point where you can buy spare bags for both the prospector and the mole at the cargo deck. Now I would always go mole bags, since despite the bags having different capacities, 12 SCU for the Argo ones versus 8 SCU for the MISC version, they have exactly the same dimensions, meaning that you can replace the 4 bags on your prospector with mole bags to increase the capacity from 32 SCU to 48 SCU per run. The Idris has a number of bays alongside each edge that neatly fit 4 bags, but there is a bunch of space off-grid as well, so we were able to squeeze in plenty more. All loaded up and ready to rock, it was time to get out and search for things to mine. Out in the orbit of Microtech, on the far edge of the Stanton system, the moon Euterpe is about as hostile as they come. Freezing cold, mountainous and ravaged by strong winds. It's not exactly an idyllic vacationing spot. But having conducted a bit of research with the Regolith Survey Corps data, we determined that it gave us one of the best strike rates of copper and corundum, with a combined 69% probability that rocks would have one of these materials. There's no chance of tungsten, but the way the resource drive event works, this doesn't really matter. Your aim is to build up SEUs of any of these mats, so you could complete the missions and get the rewards just by delivering one of the 3. So since we were in it for the long haul, I took the time to cruise the Idris down into Euterpe's atmosphere from an OM point, ensuring that we were well off the beaten track, with the nearest QT marker, Bud's Growery, more than 400 kilometers away. This should prevent any unwanted attention. Some folks might be wondering why I didn't keep the ship up in orbit and use the new system of being able to QT to your ship. Well, we found this to be a little bit unreliable. At the outset of the expedition, I had tried to make a brief jaunt into Everest Harbour to pick up additional supplies, only to find myself unable to QT back to the ship. I instead got a phantom marker out somewhere near ArcCorp, and when I travelled to it, the marker for my Idris was steaming away from me at about 1,000 meters per second. If anyone's wondering what happened to my hull A, this was the end of it unfortunately, as thankfully I had set my spawn on the Idris and was able to backspace my way on board. You live and you learn. As it was though, having the Idris down on the surface of the moon was actually really convenient. It allowed a point of reference, so for instance when I found a cluster of rocks containing more mats than I could handle in a single trip, I was able to take a distance and bearing to the Caledonia, return and unload my haul. Then I could reverse that bearing and travel back to continue working the same cluster. During the afternoon a bunch of the FRCN crew turned up and we were really able to start cooking on gas. Having more of the team on hand meant that we could join up to crack bigger rocks, we had a more dedicated pit crew available, so prospector pilots could fly into the hangar, unlock their ports and be offloaded and reloaded. And while it had to wait outside the hangar for reloading, having a mole show up let us crack some of the biggest rocks. Euterpe wasn't a kind environment though. The wind is a near constant demon that you have to contend with, but I really enjoyed the additional layer of challenge and complexity. Having to think about offsetting yourself against the elements in the prospector, and adding a layer of communication between the mole pilot and laser operators to avoid drifting off the rock or too far into the danger zone. A solid min-max argument could be made for selecting a kinder environment, with a slightly lower percentage chance of finding the right mats. But to me it's sometimes worth purposefully seeking out more of a challenge just to improve your skills. Weather effects are becoming more intense and widespread in SC. So while you could purposely select one of the less storm-prone moons or planets for an easier time now, it won't let you develop skills that will undoubtedly be increasingly useful as time goes on. Within a few hours we had a fair amount of cargo on board, so it was time to offload. My plan with the hull A hadn't quite come to fruition, so instead Sniggy and I pulled up close to a refinery station and offloaded using a C2, taking 2 trips to squeeze in every bag. I've got to say, flying a C2 full of hours of work into a refinery station gave me the same feeling I used to get running a load of quant to market in the old days of mining. Nothing quite like putting all your eggs into one basket for a proper white knuckle ride. When it came to unloading, I made sure to send about half of what we had down at a time. You now have the option to set up jobs either from a mining ship or from your station inventory at the refinery. However, if you take the latter option, which you'll need to if offloading using a cargo ship, you can't finesse it. You refine all or nothing of what's in your inventory at the time. I wanted to make sure the jobs were pretty big so that we could benefit from larger box sizes when we collect, reducing the amount of crates that we need to shift in total. But I didn't want them to be so big that they took forever to refine, or that the resultant load would be too big to load into my largest cargo ship. So all in all, this experimental run netted us 431 SCU of copper and 138 SCU of corundum. Not too shabby, but admittedly not as efficient as suffering through the cargo elevator method of completing this event. However, I don't think this matters on 2 counts. For one, we had a lot of fun doing what we did. While we had a few good-hearted moans about the wind on Euterpe and how it seemed to purposely change direction just to mess with you, we didn't have any complaints about bugged elevators, difficulty getting missions, and we didn't have to queue once. Although that last part is largely thanks to latent skill at pit stopping. And secondly, these types of missions are iterative, and I always like to carry them out first with a small crew, then look to scale things up as we run them again and again. I think we could have definitely handled more prospectors as long as we had 2 folks on the Idris ready to handle the logistics of the pit stops, and I would have probably also added in a cargo ship running the whole time, taking the jobs as the bags filled up and resupplying the Idris with more empty bags as we went. For a prospector-centric op, the Idris works really well, since it gives you a solid hangar to land and handle your pit stops in. But I think if we were to scale things up even further to a mole-centric setup, we could go as far as using a whole C as the fob, using various panels as the drop-off point for full bags and the pickup points for empties. Then we could have C2s flying in and out to take away the full ones and resupply the empties. All of this opens up even further once we see ship-based refining with the Misk Expanse or RSI Galaxy, as those willing to go out further away from the infrastructure are rewarded with higher density of materials. But by trying this stuff now, we're building up useful skills that will serve us well when we get to that point. So with all that in mind, if you enjoyed the video and want to stay tuned for any further developments in the future, then please do drop a like and hit subscribe. And of course, as I said in the beginning, if you'd like to get involved with some proper multiplayer action in SC, do swing by the Discord. But with all that said, I just want to say thank you very much for watching to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.